And we're live.
Greetings and welcome everyone to session number 2 of the free online course in the DML Commons, Program Evaluations for Connected Learning. I'm Bill Penuel, and this is a course where you will gain some practical experience in the process of educational program evaluation by exploring the real-world problems brought to you by youth-serving programs that will be serving as case studies for the course. And that all starts today with our session that includes representatives from the University of Colorado Boulder's Center for Community-Based Learning and Research, or CU Engage. With me today is the Center Director, Rowdy Hildreth, from CU Engage. We also have Jen Pacheco and Charla Agnoletti from the Public Achievement Program within CU Engage. So we're really delighted to have them as our guests here today. CU Engage is a program that supports programs and initiatives that work collaboratively with community groups to address complex public challenges through research, creative work, and action. And they do that by developing and sustaining equity-oriented partnerships, organizing opportunities for students to learn alongside community members, and supporting faculty and students to develop ethical and rigorous participatory action research methods. And I'm going to be speaking today with leaders from Center representatives from the CU Engage program, Public Achievement. We'll also likely talk a little bit about Mcu Dialogues, another program, and the work that some of the students in my class here at CU will be doing to conduct, which is called an evaluability assessment. That is something to help determine the feasibility of evaluation of the program. And I'm really grateful to have them here today because civic engagement is a primary goal of many connected learning programs. So those of you in connected learning programs that have that as a primary goal, I think you'll find today's discussion really valuable. Before I talk with them today, though, I want to give a little brief overview of the roles of theories of change and evaluation related to our reading this week. So that's the topic for today, is building theories of change. And the CU Engage team has done some work to build theories of change themselves, which we'll talk about. I also, before we get started, want to remind everyone who's watching that you can use the hashtag CLEval to pose questions on Twitter, or use the chat feature where you're watching the live webcast. And I hope you will pose questions of our guests today in this way, and also in future sessions, so that during the course of the questions, I can add some of your questions in here today. So first, just a quick overview about what theories of change are and how they can be helpful for program evaluation. Well, from my point of view, theories of change are an essential tool for helping both in program planning and in program evaluation, as I'll elaborate in a moment. I'm really excited to share with you about theories of change and to talk with my guests today about theories of change, because it's been a tool that I've used in program evaluation for my entire career, and it's just really helped me get started on the right foot with evaluations. And I hope you'll take today and think about how you can build a map of your own program, either the one that you run or the one that you're evaluating, to help you in this way. And I think you'll find that it's really an indispensable tool for really program planning and evaluation. So what is a theory of change? First and foremost, it's a map of the territory of your program. It has a lot of components to it, too. The first thing it always has is some long-term outcomes, things that you hope to accomplish with the people in your program, things that you hope that your clients or participants will get out of the program. Sometimes it also has short-term outcomes. It also has the core design features that you think are the active ingredients of your program. In the theories of change that I work with clients to develop collaboratively, we have two other really important elements. One is a set of contextual features that might have an influence on the success or the failure of a program. These can be individual characteristics of the people running the program, the characteristics of the people who are in the program, but they're also the organizational supports, like the congruence of the mission of the program with the specific, with the mission of the organization, rather, with the specific program. And then another feature that I find is often really important to include is the set of interactions with program design elements that you expect your participants to have. That's the key to accomplishing outcomes, and it's really an important but often a hard thing for programs to do. Another thing in a theory of change are the hypotheses that you have about how these things are linked to one another. How do the program design elements produce the interactions that need to happen? How do those interactions result in the outcomes that you hope to accomplish? And I emphasize that these are hypotheses because they're kind of untested. They're the things that some of them might have a basis or a warrant in research, but they're not always. And then there are the assumptions themselves, and I put these as the links that connect the different aspects of a theory of change. Again, you want these things to be plausible, to be warranted where possible by evidence, but a lot of times you're creating this program because you don't know whether these things work yet, and that's what the program is intended to test. Another feature that's really important to know about theories of change, if you're an evaluator and you're coming to a program, even if it's a well-developed program, often the theory of change is implicit. And so what that theory is really designed to do is to help you articulate the designs and outcomes. Those are the elements that I think most programs can do right away. They may not have agreement about them, but those things come quickly. What's typically harder for people to do is figure out what are the interactions with these program design elements that people are going to have in order to produce outcomes. If I have a civic engagement program and I want them to engage in a form of reflection, say, on their work, how do we need students, for example, to engage with those reflections so that they actually benefit from them? If they do them rotely or not at all, that's obviously going to result in less positive outcomes than are hoped for. But really getting those explicit can help programs and evaluators better understand what they need to be measuring for implementation. And as I noted earlier, some of the assumptions that you might have going in are untested, and that can be hard, and they may also be implicit. My view is that we best develop these theories of change in a participatory manner, and that is we need to include people who have different roles and maybe a different kind of stake in the program in the process of developing theory of change. And I hope my CU Engage colleagues will talk a little bit about who they involved and how in the process. It helps to bring them all together in the same room and to work together to do that and to spend some time with it. Sometimes it might take up to half a day or more, several sessions to really build together a theory of action. And sometimes the evaluator, if they can't bring everybody together, has to work independently, but go around and talk to lots of people and then synthesize that information and then feed it back to the primary client of the evaluation. Either way, depending on time available, what's critical is that it's a participatory process. You get lots of different voices. This kind of mapping really can help you and the program designers alike in programs. It can help, and I hope that through your own process, and I hope in listening today, you'll hear some of the different differences of different stakeholders' perspectives that might be reflected in a theory of change, but also the commonalities, the things that makes a program a program. And that will help us as evaluators go away and really think about how we can measure the things that matter. Measure the outcomes that matter, measure the interactions that matter, and measure the contextual features that are really important to capture an evaluation too. And then you'll be ready actually at the end of the theory of change process to design an evaluation specifically to select the measures that are really ideal for those. So that's really a general overview, and we're going to now turn to my colleagues from CU Engage, and I'm going to ask them a series of questions that gives you a little bit of more background about who they are and also how they're thinking about evaluation. So I'm going to start by asking Rowdy a question a little bit to tell us a little bit about what CU Engage is and also how it came to be.
Hello, thanks for having us, Bill. I think that I think you gave a good overview of our kind of mission statement in your introduction, but what CU Engage is in the kind of administrative language is administrative consolidation. At CU there are a number of civic engagement programs kind of scattered around the university, and working in isolation without much support and oversight. And so the vice provost for outreach saw this as a problem. A task force was formed, and CU Engage was the response. But more importantly, in addition to the 8 or 9 programs that have been consolidated under one administrative unit, we've also extended and expanded the mission to include a research component, and that's both supporting faculty and graduate students who are engaged in community-based research, which was not part of any formal setting, and include an evaluation or research angle that all the programs within it, we are going to try to measure their impact for the provost, for the community, and for CU as a whole.
One quick follow-up, Rowdy. So I think that the research and evaluation component is what makes this so different from a lot of outreach in university. What do you think that the research and evaluation adds to what is often done as outreach, but without the research component?
Well, I think that I've worked with many programs, and everyone wants to do assessment, but has challenge doing it. And so they're so busy doing the program, and working in communities is hard. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of logistics. And so it was intentional and explicit to include capacity to do this. And so myself, that's a large part of my job, and Jen, who we're going to hear from in a little bit, it's her research assistant. So that way we can facilitate this work still with under the guiding principles of collaborative work. So these are all participatory evaluations using the theory of change, but capacity is a really important thing. And then we want to actually, in greater detail, measure impact as well.
That's great. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about some of the specifics of different programs, Rowdy, and then I'll ask Charla to talk a little bit about public achievement specifically, since she represents that program.
Great. So the evaluation so far is really looking at the undergraduate learning pathways, and these are either curricular or co-curricular, but I want to talk about a couple other programs as well. We have a faculty fellows for community-based learning, and this program is trying to incentivize and support faculty who want to create courses that have community-based components to that. We also have a graduate studies fellowship along the same principles to support and incentivize graduate students who want to carry out this work. And then an undergraduate research component as well. And Ben Kirshner, the faculty director, is the one who's leading up the graduate studies and the undergraduate, and I'm leading up the faculty initiatives. But in terms of the evaluation, we're focusing on 5 important undergraduate initiatives. And the first is the Invest Community Studies program, and this is an intensive 2-year course-based service learning certificate program. It's 18 credits, 6 hours of internships every week, and 2 6-week summer experiences. So that's probably the most intensive program. Then we have Mcu Dialogues, which is a program that engages diverse groups on campus in conversation. The real point is to bring people together and talk about topics across lines of difference. And that's usually a one-time event, so it would be a group of students in a residence hall with the housing facility staff. We also have a leadership studies minor, and this is a 15-credit minor that has a foundations course, 3 electives courses, and then a capstone course. In the capstone course, all the leadership studies minors get together in groups and address a leadership challenge. So they work with a community partner to address a challenge that they have. Another program that's part of the evaluation is the Books to Scholars program. This is a program that's co-curricular. It's 15 students who work between 2 and 4 years to design and carry out their own civic engagement project. And then our final program, sorry, there's a lot of programs, is Public Achievement. And I'll turn it over to Charlotte to talk about Public Achievement.
Thanks. So Public Achievement is housed at CU Boulder, but is also a national and international model for basically engaging youth in civic work and doing the real work of democracy. And so at CU Boulder, how we do the program is we pair about 60 undergrads who we work with students in 3rd through 12th grade in schools in the surrounding area, and we have about 2 coaches, usually a pair of coaches, who are our undergrads working with a team of anywhere from 5 to 12 students and youth in the community, and then they together are looking to identify what are issues happening in their community that are important to their own lives, and then really learning the skills of democracy and the skills of social change to make an impact on those issues. And I think one of the really interesting things is that with public achievement being housed in CU Engage, we have a really, really unique opportunity to shift from this model that public achievement can be, which is very service-oriented, to a more sort of critical research-based program.
That's great, and it really strikes me for the folks here who are linked to the connected learning model. One of the things that strikes me about all of the programs is that they are examples of designs for learning across different settings. So there are classroom experiences for undergraduates, but also it's being in the community that's really important. And you think about how the connections between these two. I didn't know if there's something about public achievement too, about Charlotte, how you think about that connection between the being on campus and what students do there versus what they do in the K-12 setting, and how those connect in terms of the learning experiences.
Yeah, so we really are working with our undergrads who are part of our stakeholder community in developing their critical mindset so that they too can be critical citizens working for democracy, learning the skills of social change. They're doing that work, and then also working with them about how do we work across lines of difference, and how do you break down the boundaries of this savior mentality of, oh, we're just coming in and doing service work and helping these young people, but really instead engaging in this process with them of social change. And as all of our undergrads would say, I mean, their favorite and most rich learning experience is always in the community. So I think there's nothing that really beats that experience of having theory and talking about that in a classroom setting, but then also going and engaging in the work. It's where the true learning happens, for sure.
Right. So one of the things that I think is really interesting and actually presents a unique evaluation challenge is that your center is a consolidation. It's a bringing together of lots of different programs. From your perspective, from each of you, I'd love to hear, what do you think are some of the common outcomes or common or common strategies across the 5 different programs that you're studying? And also, what are some key differences among them that you think have potential implications for evaluation?
I'll start. I think that Charlotte hit on one of the really important key values, which is to work collaboratively and reciprocally with communities, so to try to break through that notion of service for and really working collaboratively in the program design, program evaluation, and the kind of ongoing program maintenance. I think that's the most important thing. The second thing she also mentioned is learning. So it's both taking action, making an impact in the world, and living in that tension between educating and organizing that is central to a lot of these initiatives. I think that we're also along with learning, a kind of a praxis-oriented view is really important. So reflection is key across all programs, and reflection that's guided by academic content or academic theory. I think some of the differences, there's some differences in approach, and there's some differences in social justice orientation. So Invest Community Studies has a strong social justice orientation, which trends towards more, I would say, left politics. Public achievement, its frame is around public work, and so it's more willing to work across at least the standard ideological divisions on a more pragmatic grounds, and I think that's actually a really good thing. It's led to some good conversations about our different approaches. I'll stop now and turn over to see if Charlotte and Jen have anything else to add.
Jen, you want to add, what do you see as the commonalities and differences?
Some of the commonalities I see really looking at personal growth, and so how do different players take these experiences, and along the lines Rowdy was talking about learning, but how does that then change their own perspective of their identity within a larger community. And I think that's something that I've seen similar across the programs, is really that attention to what is it doing to the participants' identity and growth, and how in the end does that make for a better society, and how we reflect on civic engagement. The one difference that I think makes it a little difficult is the duration of the program. So we have everything from Invest, which students, as Rowdy pointed out, are in for several years. They get to know each other. They really create this sense of community together and work with their community partners, where the community partners get to know the students. And so that relationship is just inherently a deeper relationship, versus Dialogues, which might be a one-time event where a student is participating. Maybe it's a dialogue with custodial staff and residential halls, and that might only happen once. And so because these relationships and the duration of the relationship is different, I think that causes some difficult challenges to evaluating across the different programs.
What do you think is different in terms of, so you name some of the challenges in terms of the length of the program. What do you see as different, say, about public achievement versus CU Dialogues in terms of the implications for evaluation?
Sure. I think with PA, for example, one of the things that we look at the beginning, the course that's connected to the work in the schools, we're looking at a initial paper, a reflection paper, and then we look at the end of the course another reflection of the students, and really looking in that writing for signs of you know, how are they internalizing these experiences? Are they taking up some of these learning opportunities? And so we have an ability to use that duration in the evaluation's favor to be able to come back to a student and see how this experience has affected them, where Dialogues, that follow-up might be more difficult because they're not still in class. You know, finding those students you know, a semester later poses some issues. And so I think with evaluation, just our own interaction with who are the stakeholders. And so if it's a one-time event, that interaction is going to be less, and fewer chances to get some of that longitudinal information.
That's great. And Charlotte, how do you feel public achievement fits in terms of commonalities with other programs and differences with others in CU Engage?
Well, one of the commonalities that I was thinking of is that all of our CU Engage programs and CU Engage itself, for us as faculty and staff at CU, creates a community space where this type of work and this type of reflection and dialogue can occur. And so I really think that what I see public achievement as is we have students who've been part of this program who sort of select back in for their entire undergraduate career. And so what I really see as one of the distinct things about public achievement, which I would say it really shares with Invest, community studies, is that the students themselves then take on, like Jen said, not only looking at other aspects of their own identity, but this program and this work becomes part of their identity and a huge salient experience within their studies. And so I think that that is something that we are all sort of striving to do with our programming, and I think especially with public achievement and Invest studies, those really shine through.
And what would you say is the value? You talk about creating a community space across the programs. What to you is the value of having that community space? Because it didn't exist before in the same way, I assume, before CU Engage was created.
I think that in a certain way it did exist before CU Engage was created, but I think what CU Engage does is, so for me, the evaluation piece is crucial, because I think that the community was there before, and that identity development and that civic development was happening within our students, but there was no evidence of that except for their own testimonies and experience. And so I think at CU Engage, it helps us as directors of programs and as a community to say, number one, what are we doing that works? that we just were naturally doing and want to continue to replicate, because this is helping develop our students' identities and their critical awareness and consciousness as citizens. But then what are things that we can improve on, and what are things that we can change, and how can we evolve them in that process of creating these programs as that community that they want to be part of and is also supporting their development.
That's great. And Rowdy and Jen, from your standpoint, what makes this center have some value above and beyond the individual programs? So.
I'll go first. I think that like Charlotte, the conversations that we're having across programs really speaks to the value for the individual programs, and the evaluation conversations have been very good. We've also had a series of conversations about inclusion and equity that have been really productive, and it allows the center as a whole to both clearly articulate and speak for a particular approach to learning and research with the community. So we're seen as a representative for this approach to community engagement across campus. And so there's both conversational space, which I think is the value added, and then there's also kind of what is our message that we're trying to convey to the community and the campus. And as a kind of and what's happening because of that is we're becoming a nexus point where we're starting to connect lots of different groups, which is really where we want to go.
And I'd like to, talk about being that communication piece. I think it's really important on the level of the university to be a collective, to be looked at as a movement of people on campus that are doing similar things, that have similar values and passions, and having that be something that can connect to other universities or other communities where you're speaking the same dialogue, you have that discourse of engagement, and it really brings attention to the center, but also the capacity building, I think, is really important. And so an example of that is the work that Ben and students have done around community-based participatory action research on campus. And so that's getting the attention of not only the provost's office, but also other offices. The academic success, the TRIO programs invited us to talk about what we did, and then think about how can this help TRIO students that are looking at how can they improve their programs to address issues of first-generation students on campus not feeling welcome. And so I think it's a larger presence that happens with CU Engage, and then really allows us to get into spaces that maybe nobody knew about community participatory action research on campus, and they want to use it for their own programs.
That's terrific. And I want to mark for people who are listening to this from an evaluation standpoint to try to learn about evaluation that this question of what is the value added of a center or a collaborative is one that a lot of investors in collaboratives really want to know the answer to. And I know that there are many such collaboratives in the world of connected learning, the Hive networks, for example, where different organizations come together and a funder invests in their time together. And so often a really useful question for those programs to reflect on is the one that I've just posed. What is the value add above your individual work together? And I think CU Engage has a few really clear answers to that, which are really terrific. I want to turn now to talk a little bit about the theories of change work, because I know you guys have been doing some of that and working across the different programs to develop those theories of change and create some customized evaluation plans on the basis of this. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you've gone about that, especially Rowdy and Jen?
Sure. So we are using, I think, a relatively standard theory of change model. We're not doing, it's not a comprehensive community initiative, but it's looking at both CU Engage as a whole and a number of different programs. And we're setting up as a 2-year process. And so last year, and this is, in terms of who we report to, is the provost. The provost is really interested in student learning outcomes. And so we worked last year to have a series of meetings across all of CU Engage and individual meetings with program leaders to say what are our ideal outcomes, what do we want to accomplish, and then really looking hard about what we're actually doing and what we're spending our time in, and having those conversations about where we want to put our efforts, and then refining, saying of the many outcomes, everyone had a lot of outcomes, what are the 2 to 3 most important that we want to measure, and then doing the causal tracing, how do these outcomes come about, and thinking through what our assumptions are, and also thinking through our intermediate measures as well as our long-term measures. So this year we're working on the community partner outcomes, and so Charlotte and Jen are new to CU Engage this fall, and so have kind of jumped into this process midstream. And so what we've been doing is we've been having a serious conversation with our community partners about what they think the most important outcomes are for the partnership, and then what we think the most important outcomes are for the partnership too. So identifying shared outcomes and also identifying places where there might be divergent. At the same time, we're trying to look at CU Engage as a whole and develop a theory of change for CU Engage as a whole, and that's been a little slower. So we've talked about kind of the value added, but we haven't necessarily done the hard work of theorizing that right now, and so that'll probably really start in earnest this spring and carry into the summer. We do have some common instruments across the initiatives, and these are in terms of pre and post tests that are measuring some relatively standard outcomes in terms of political and civic efficacy, community-based research skills, and then we're looking at a lot of issues of equity and inclusion, and have an assumption that these types of courses offer a different experience of interaction across difference than they might elsewhere be on campus, and so we're measuring those against the CU Boulder's climate survey measures. So that's where we are. We are really midstream, and we're in process. I'll turn it over to Jen.
So where I came in and some of the support that working on really supporting the different programs and how do we start these conversations with community partners. So oftentimes when there is a university and community partnership, it's maybe created and 5 years later nobody has gone back to see if it's meeting the needs of the community. Is it still on track? Has the train got off the track and nobody has alerted the university partner? And so I think one of the really important steps is this co-construction and this collaboration with community partners to identify outcomes. And so one of the things that I and Rowdy and I did was put together a protocol for a conversation then that the directors could have with their community partners, and tested that out with public achievement. And so with this protocol, some of the questions were, tell us about a time that the relationship really worked, maybe a home run story for public achievement students, and share a story that illustrates when this partnership didn't work. And so really getting their perspective on what's going well and what's not going well, what do we need to return to look at. And so I went and spoke with one of the teachers for PA at the high school, and he's also works with AVID, which is a college readiness program. And so some of the things that came up during that conversation were some misalignment of outcomes and goals. And so, he talked about using public achievement as a college readiness piece. So the students write about their community service, they write about their experience, and that wasn't necessarily one of the outcomes that Rowdy and Charlotte had put together as an outcome. And relationship building was another thing that he talked a lot about, or the relationships between the college students and the high school students. And although those are very informal at this point, in his mind, those were really important to getting students to see themselves as going to college, getting first-generation students of color to identify as college-going students. So all of these things, again, were not necessarily outcomes of public achievement, the program, but were things that for him he had to report on for his other duties. And so that was something else that came up. How can we work with community partners to understand what are their reporting responsibilities, and how does something like theory of change, how can that also benefit them when they're going to get funding for the programs that they need to support? So those were two things, the misalignment of outcomes that came out, and then also just being aware of how can we support community partners, not just getting the evaluation for our own purposes, whether that's end of the year report or funding sources, but how can we support the community in having that information as well. And so each director or staff member from the different programs then took that protocol and then had a discussion with their community partners about how do we discuss the 3 outcomes we want to focus on, and then how do we backwards map to really look and make sure the activities that are happening are going to lead to the outcomes that we decided on jointly. And I can pass it over to Charlotte to talk about that second conversation in December, where they did kind of boil down what some of those outcomes would be, joint outcomes, and how to move forward. Does that work, Charlotte? Okay.
Have like a very interesting ray of sunshine coming in on my video, so I hope that's okay. So I first of all just have to say that this evaluation piece that we're doing through the collective work with CU Engage is, I'm so grateful because it's just the right work to do, especially when you're working with community partners. And as a director of a single program, I'm sure I would speak for more than just myself in saying that there are so many other things going on that formal methods of evaluation sort of take the back seat. And so to have a center, and again, this is back to the value added question, but to have a center where we all come together and we talk about this, and it's our homework as practitioners, and like Jen and Rowdy put in the work to help give us some documents and some bones to work with. It's just such an incredible added value to my program to be able to engage in this work and have support doing that. And so what's been really great is in the initial phase that Jen was talking about with the home run stories and times the relationship hasn't worked, in addition to other questions, I was able to go and talk with not only the avid high school teacher that Jen was referring to, but the other school leaders and partners that we work with, and have that same conversation and just have a sit down and say, where are we? And like Jen said, misalignment is there. I mean, all of my different sites have different outcomes that they're looking for, which differ than the outcomes that we initially sort of set out between Rowdy and myself. And so that is a real thing, but then it also is good to just sort of know and have that transparency. And then in terms of the follow-up, like Jen mentioned, Rowdy and I met with this specific high school teacher who helps coordinate about 150 students that we work with at a local high school. We were really able to understand the differences and understand those misalignments, and then say, okay, well, where are places that we can come into alignment, and where are places that we can shift some minor programmatic elements on our end, and also develop some programmatic elements together specific to that site that are going to mutually benefit both our community partner and our program and our students. So some of those outcomes that we came to were, number one, like Jen mentioned, talking about college is a huge requirement on the end of this AVID program, because they have to report back to their people in California and say, here's the curriculum that we've been doing. And so we were able to sit down together and say, normally we do some kind of an icebreaker or introduction, and what happens if we just ask our undergraduate coaches to shift that and have it be college focused, and spend 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of every meeting once a week talking about what are the 3 most important things that you wish you knew about college before you went, or what was your hardest class and what math classes should you take, or things like that, and just opening up that dialogue so that we are helping to meet that outcome for our community partnership, and also because it benefits our students and their relationships, like Jen said, which is a shared outcome that we both have interest in. And then additionally, we talked about creating sort of an alumni database, which again becomes mutually beneficial for both of us. the high school community partner wants to be able to sort of track their students and see how have they been doing in college, and are they more inclined to be engaged in community work or public work, or what kinds of things are they studying in college, and does that have any influence on having been a part of the public achievement program, which again for us is like evaluation gold. We want that kind of information as well. So those have been really, really great conversations, but I think are also leading to a different level of partnership within our programming.
That's really terrific, and I think this is a great example of how a theory of change process can support not only really smart evaluation design, so that, to illustrate here, you've broadened the outcomes that you're looking at to be responsive to stakeholders, but it's also led to a set of conversations and program adaptations and refinements to build a partnership. So it's supporting program planning. Now, Charlotte, I know you have more than just AVID as a program that's a home. You have a couple of other ones. Do you? What are the concerns of those programs, and how do you anticipate adapting either instruments of the program to those contexts?
So the other partners that we have in the community, we work with I Have a Dream Foundation, and we started with a class of about 90 third graders who are all low-income, first-generation, sort of college-bound students who do extra programming after school to really attempt to bridge that achievement and opportunity gap. And so as partners, I think that we have multiple outcomes with them. We have also an AmeriCorps partnership with them, so we every year have an AmeriCorps member who works with us. But in general, I think the outcomes at this point with this community partnership, which is fairly new, is they just want really quality programming for their students after school, where their students feel that they have positive relationships with adults in the community, and also are in the beginning stages of developing that critical awareness as young citizens. But I think the power of this relationship and our evaluation through CU Engage's guidance is that we have the potential of a year after year relationship with these students who we hopefully will be working with them as fourth graders, as fifth graders, as middle schoolers, and then hopefully as high schoolers as well. And so I think that evaluation there plays a key role, where we're really just at the beginning stages of having that conversation, but I think over time can develop into what happens when you work with students over, potential 5 to 8 year trajectory, and how are outcomes evaluated through that process. Another one of our partners is an organization called Family Resource Schools, and we work with them at a local elementary school, and so they work with low-income families and provide free after-school programming to them. And so again, their number one priority for an outcome is great after-school programming. So those are easy outcomes for us to align with, because of course we want our program to be great for everyone as well. But one of the great parts about the theory of change and the evaluation and community partnership dialogue process was that I was able to talk with the community partner from Family Resource Center on a more critical level. And the questions that Rowdy and Jen put together really led us into a dialogue about talking about, well, what do we want for these low-income students? What do we want for these students who are really experiencing, cycles of poverty? And what does that mean to work with them and give them skills to be agents of change in their communities? And so we were really able to, through that conversation, identify a mutual outcome that we both wanted, which was to involve more students who are on free and reduced lunch and who are experiencing more oppression and marginalization in their life, and bring them into the programming. So that was a really great outcome that would not have happened if we wouldn't have been doing this theory of change work.
That's great. Now, your community partners are really a focal stakeholder, I know, in the young people that are served in the community. But you have other stakeholders as well, and I'm wondering, Charlotte, who for you at PA are the other stakeholders that you are trying to think about outcomes for, and then maybe I'd ask Rowdy and Jen to think about inside the university, like what are the care-abouts of the who are those stakeholders and what do they care about from the evaluation?
So I would say that the stakeholders who I have the most interaction with are the undergrad students themselves. And so we sort of have two trajectories, if you will, of undergraduates. So we have undergraduates who go through our 2-semester course and serve as coaches and the primary guides to our students in the community. And then we also have students, undergraduates, who have gone through that full year, been coaches, and then serve as teaching assistants. And so they really take on a secondary leadership role. And so I think I'm always thinking of them as well as stakeholders, because they are also people who we want to help develop and give leadership opportunities to. And I think that it's extremely important that we always have them also in sort of a separate evaluation process and are involving them in this idea of how is this working for you, and are you being given leadership opportunities. And like Jen mentioned earlier, we're looking at their identities and how their identities are changing, or different parts of their identities are being activated through this work, and what that means for them as citizens. So I think as of recently, I've been thinking a lot about how do we differentiate that role for our students, and I think evaluation plays a huge part in that, of how do we in year 1 create an experience for them, and then how does that change in year 2 or 3 to help with time give them even more experience and development.
What about some of the university stakeholders, Rowdy? Yeah.
Well, I think that we have a number of stakeholders, and the course is part of the School of Education and the Education minor and the Leadership minor as well. And so we have those kind of curricular concerns, and also kind of a chance to make the case for this type of learning to the broader university as well. So trying to engage productively with the College of Arts and Sciences Core Curriculum Committee and the general community of faculty who are interested in this. We're also working really hard to recruit CU undergraduates who look a little bit more like the communities they're working with. So we're working with various resource centers and student groups on campus, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Community Engagement, what's called the Mcu Center, which is Center for Undergraduate Engagement. So those kind of on university stakeholders as well as upper administration, deans, provosts, people like that. I think there's another important group of stakeholders, which are a lot of the projects end up making little mini partnerships with homeless shelters, with resource centers, with the police, and so we're attentive to those as well, and thinking through the broader density of our work and the connections of our work across CU Engage programs to see where places. I Have a Dream has partnerships across the university, and we really want to, work in collaboration with others to enhance that overall work rather than kind of people, divvying up the various agencies.
That's great. So, go ahead, jump in, Jen.
I would just add a couple, looking more on a meta level, like the staff themselves, stakeholders, and how if they're responsible for evaluating their own programs, what does that look like to think of folks here at CU Engage as stakeholders in this, as well as the Provost's office, and who do we answer to as far as outcomes evaluation and whether or not we're meeting what we're intending to do. And I also think in the case of dialogues, I don't think Rowdy hasn't talked a whole lot about that, but the housing, different departments on campus, stakeholders as well. So in a sense, it's a non-traditional way of thinking of a community partner, because they are still part of the university, but definitely community partners that are within the university.
That's great. And there's been a request from Bernie Farrell on Twitter to share the questions that you use to develop your higher level conversations with stakeholders, and sounds like we can make that available to people after the class. is over. So please share that with me, and I'll make sure it gets uploaded, Jen and Rowdy. Thanks for being so generous with that. So one question is, you all embrace a participatory approach to research, which is obviously pretty involvement intensive. And so how do you think about how much time is desired for the involvement of different stakeholders in the evaluation process, whether that's for program leaders or for the teachers in the K-12 settings, or even for undergrads? You know, how do you think about figuring out how much time is right to allocate for that? Anyone can answer that.
Yeah, I think that's a really big challenge that we're highly attuned to. And on one level, part of the participatory evaluation in some ways is a devolving of carrying out the evaluation to the stakeholders and to the partners themselves. And in some cases, that's asking them to do work in addition to what they're already doing. So we're really cognizant of trying to create instruments that are both user-friendly in the sense, not too onerous, but also useful. And though that involves kind of hard conversations when we're going to select which outcomes we're going to measure, and so there's a lot of narrowing in that sense. We're only going to pick 1 or 2 or 3 rather than the kind of broad range if we were a research evaluation team doing an intensive study. So that's one way we try to manage that. And then the second way is we ask and people respond, and we give them the ability to say this isn't possible for me right now, and try to keep working within the kind of the range of what people are capable of. And in general, I think everyone has responded positively to those conversations. Everyone has thought that the conversations at each step of the way have been a really great opportunity to reflect and to get together. And so there's a real desire to have those conversations. Then coming down to the kind of administering and interpreting and analyzing the data, that's a slightly harder thing, but we're also have the capacity to help on that level. So people will help design, if they do surveys or if they do in-class assignments, things like that. They collect those, and then Jen and I and other researchers will help people make sense of them and have conversations about them. But it's a big challenge.
How do you see the level of involvement, Charlotte, from where you sit in terms of as a program leader for this? Like, what do you get out of being involved in the evaluation, and how do you manage that time versus your other responsibilities?
Speaking very honestly, what CU Engage and Rowdy and Jen have asked me to do has been so minimal. I mean, I have, like Rowdy said, given out surveys in class and had community meetings with community partners, which is what I should be doing anyways. So I feel like it is creating some structure to help me do these things. So it really doesn't feel at all like extra work for me. And if it were, of course I would say, but it doesn't feel that way as of now at all, which is I'm very grateful for. It just feels like enhancing the work that we're already doing and actually helping me see some things that I might not have otherwise.
So you're doing a good job from the program leader's standpoint, it sounds like.
Thanks. Yeah.
Let me add a caveat there. The hard work hasn't really started yet, so we can check back in a year and see if Charlotte says the same thing.
Haven't asked a lot yet.
Yeah, so we're at the various conversations, but then gets to the harder point of collecting, analyzing, and then helping people with reports and things like that. So there's more work to be done.
That's great. So what I want to do now is kind of turn and have you all face outward to the people who are taking this course and tell them a little bit more about what your current needs are that maybe are not being met or you're worried about being met, and to share a specific evaluation issue that you might be struggling with that perhaps the people who are taking the online course could help you address or at least think about in a new way or differently from how you are. So I don't know who wants to start, but sounds like Rowdy.
I'll start. Yeah. So I think there's this real question of evaluation capacity, how much you ask and what you're asking people to do, and so really thinking through the best ways to help develop the capacity for the staff and the community partners to carry out their own evaluation. And we're kind of like learning by doing, so we haven't quite figured that one out. But I think that's for this theory of change participatory model to work, you really have to both build the capacity and then support the people to do that work. And so trying to figure out that balance, I think, is a big challenge that we're looking at right now. I'll stop and see if anyone else has something to add.
I'll just add, from taking the PA example, when we talk about relationships, how do you measure whether or not this relationship is, how deep is the relationship, how is that adding to the high school students' experience? And so I think as a measurement tool, Rowdy and Ben have kind of looked around for some different kind of social mapping people have done, but I think that's something to put out there. If anyone knows a really good way to measure relationships, pass it on.
Okay, my mic's on. For me, the thing that's on the top of my mind is our youth, and our K through 12th grade youth that we work with, and what does authentic evaluation with them look like? At the point that we're at now, we give them a pre and a post survey, and of course then everything else is just through our informal evaluations with them as the year goes by. But I really wonder what authentic evaluation with the students who are at the center of our service and work really looks like. So again, if anybody has some methods for that or ideas or experiences with what has worked really well, I'm very open to hearing more about that. Thanks.
That's great. So I heard 3 challenges, just to summarize them. Let me hear if I got this right. So Rowdy raised the challenge of how do we actually help people involved in be involved in just the right amount, and figure out how we want to involve them specifically in helping to build the capacity of the local programs. And Jen is suggesting that they would really like to find some good measures of the quality of relationships that are built and promoted through the different programs. And then Charla is asking, how do we involve young people meaningfully in the evaluation work? Perhaps in the same participatory way that you're involving the adults in the program. Did I get those challenges right? All right. So
that's good. I think the one caveat I would add to Jen's on relationships, at least for the particular high school, is they want a particular quality relationship of high school students seeing in themselves the university students who they're working with. So there's a second order of reflection, not than just having an important personal relationship, but having a personal relationship that leads to some sort of identity shift. So it's a even raising the bar on that measuring relationships.
This is great. So what I want to do is invite everyone who is taking the course this week to respond to the challenges that have been posed and the issues that they've raised with the panelists today. And I want to do a second thing this week, because I think that as a news center, CU Engage can always benefit from an outsider's perspective. What do you think is the value added of this center? What makes this center special that they might maybe not even be thinking about themselves, but that you heard and that really struck you today? So add your voice to what you think is unique about CU Engage, what kind of outcomes they might be able to accomplish given their programming today. So where do you do this? This discussion is going to be happening in the forum for the course. And the URL for that is forum.dmlhub.net. And you can also continue the conversation from today using the Twitter hashtag CLEval on Twitter. And as much as possible, I'd like you to try something as you make your contributions, something that'll make the contributions more helpful both to the panelists and also to help us get some good conversation going on in the forum. And that is, when you go to post, instead of writing your own unique line or new subject area, try to see if you can build on to somebody else's suggestion or respond to it. Maybe you have a critique of that particular challenge. But rather than starting a new topic or thread, try to add on to one so that we can get that conversation going and build out a suggestion that you think a panelist could use. And so I just want to, before closing, I want to thank the panelists today, Rowdy, Jen, and Charla, for being here. This takes time out of your busy day to do that, so thank you for being here today. Thanks to all of you. And I'll announce that the next webinar will be Kemi Jonah, Reed Stevens of the Fuse Studio project in Chicago, and Daniela DiGiacomo, a member of their evaluation team from here at CU. And our topic is going to be developing measures for program evaluation that are tailored to those programs and that make the use of the existing digital infrastructures of programs, the data collection that can happen that way. So thanks everyone for attending, and again, thanks to the panelists for being with us today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.